The night I watched my only son laugh in a car full of strangers while his wife lay dying 3 floors above us, something inside me quietly broke. It didn't shatter with noise. It cracked like thin ice, deep and silent, where no one could see. Before I begin, if you care about stories like mine, please like this video and subscribe. It means more to me than you know, more than my son ever understood. I was standing on the hospital steps, fingers trembling around a lukewarm paper cup of coffee that tasted like burned plastic. The automatic doors kept opening and closing behind me with a soft hiss, letting out waves of antiseptic air and weary footsteps. Every time they slid apart, I heard a machine beeping somewhere down the hall, steady and cold, keeping time with my daughter-in-law's fragile breaths. Then I heard it. Music. Loud, thumping bass rolling down the street like a storm. A black SUV, glossy, expensive, the safest model they had, the one I had bought for the family, came flying around the corner. The headlights sliced through the dark. The windows were rolled down even though the night was cold enough to make my fingers ache. My son was behind the wheel. My Marcus. He threw his head back and laughed, one hand on the steering wheel, the other waving as 2 young women shrieked with delight beside him. One of them had her bare arm hanging out the window, bracelets catching the streetlight like tiny mocking stars. He didn't even glance at the hospital. Not one look, not 1 second. Inside that building, his wife Alina was fighting for her life, her body hooked to tubes, her chest rising under a thin hospital blanket. I had just been at her bedside. I had just brushed damp hair from her forehead. And out here, my son was cruising past with music so loud it rattled the glass behind me. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I pulled it out with numb fingers. A message from Marcus. "Hey, Ma, I'm at the hospital with Alina. It's bad. I haven't left her side. Pray for us." I stared at his words while the taillights of that SUV disappeared into the city night. The screen blurred, not from tears at first, but from the shock of realizing my boy could lie that easily, that calmly, while club music still echoed in my bones. My heart didn't just crack for Alina. It cracked for the boy I once held, the boy who used to cling to my skirt and say, "Mama, I'll take care of you when I grow up." Standing there on those cold concrete steps, with the taste of burned coffee and betrayal on my tongue, I realized something terrible. My son was not where he said he was. My son was not who I thought he was. And I had no idea yet just how far he'd already gone. What came next shattered everything I believed. 3 days before that night, I was in my small kitchen up north, stirring a pot of chicken soup that smelled like rosemary and garlic, when the first real whisper of dread settled in my chest. I had been calling Marcus for 2 days. No answer. Call after call, going straight to voicemail or ringing into nothing. Alina hadn't answered either. For her, that was even stranger. She was the type to text back a heart or a smiley face, even if she was too busy for a call. That girl never left anyone hanging. At first, I told myself what mothers always tell themselves. He's probably busy. Maybe they're away for the weekend. Maybe she lost her phone. But there's a certain kind of silence that isn't ordinary. It has weight. It sits on your shoulders and presses until you can't pretend anymore. I stood there, wooden spoon in my hand, and I felt it, the cold, heavy knot just under my ribs. My mind tried to argue with it, but my hands were already moving on their own. I turned off the stove. I wiped my hands on a dish towel. I walked to the bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out my old travel suitcase. "I'm being dramatic," I muttered to myself as I folded sweaters. "They'll laugh when I show up unannounced. I'll look like a crazy old woman." But even as I said that, my fingers shook while I zipped the suitcase up. In my tote bag, I placed 2 jars of homemade plum jam, Marcus's favorite since he was a boy. Beside them, I tucked a small knitted elephant I'd bought weeks ago for no reason I could explain. Alina wasn't pregnant, at least not that I knew of, but I wanted to bring her something soft, something that said, "You are loved, you are not alone." The airport the next morning was a blur of rolling suitcases, coffee smells, and announcements echoing over my head. Usually, when I flew to see my son, there was a flutter of excitement in my chest. This time, my heart felt like a stone. I watched families reunite, children running, grandparents being pulled into hugs. I clutched my boarding pass like it was a lifeline and tried not to cry right there at the gate. On the flight, the hum of the engines and the chatter around me faded into a dull roar. I stared out the window as the clouds swallowed the land below. Thoughts raced through my mind in circles. Did I do something? Did I push him too hard? Was he mad at me? Or was he in trouble? I landed in Marcus and Alina's city just after sunset. The air was thicker, warmer than back home, humid, with a faint smell of rain and exhaust. My taxi wound through streets I didn't know, past bright signs and quiet houses, until we pulled up in front of their building, a pretty brick place with tall windows and a tiny patch of garden out front. I had bought that apartment for them after their wedding. I signed the papers with hands that shook from happiness. So you two never have to start the way I did. No damp basements, no noisy neighbors, a real home. I stepped out of the taxi, grabbed my suitcase, and walked up the front steps. Marcus's door on the 3rd floor was half open, just hanging there. I froze. My heart gave one hard, painful thump. And as I pushed that door open with the tips of my fingers, I had no idea what Trina's baking or Marcus's cologne. No, it was a heavy, stale mix of cold grease, old smoke, and something sour underneath, like spoiled wine and forgotten food. I stepped inside slowly, my suitcase wheels thudding over the threshold. The hallway light was on, too bright, showing everything it shouldn't. Shoes were scattered everywhere. One sneaker lay on its side, a heel half crushed under the weight of a winter coat thrown carelessly onto the floor. There was a dark scuff mark on the cream wall, like someone had kicked it hard. "Hello?" My voice sounded small in their own apartment. "Marcus? Alina?" No answer. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant traffic outside. I moved toward the kitchen. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. The sink overflowed with dishes, plates with crusted sauce, cups with dried coffee rings, forks stuck into abandoned takeout containers. On the table, there were empty beer bottles, a sticky ring where a glass had sat too long, and a pizza box with one slice turned upside down, cheese glued to the cardboard. In the middle of this chaos sat a stack of unopened envelopes, pink and white, some stamped "Final Notice," some with red ink shouting words I didn't want to read. Electric, water, gas. I picked one up. My fingers left a clean stripe through the dust on top of it. Dust on bills. No one had even bothered to pretend they cared. Then my eyes fell on a small plastic bag on the counter. I knew that logo, the pharmacy down the street. Inside were unopened pill bottles. I pulled one out, turned it over. Alina Morales, take 1 tablet twice daily, blood pressure. Another, heart medication. Another, take with food, do not skip doses. The seal wasn't even broken. I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles turned white. "Where are you, baby?" I whispered to the empty kitchen. "What's been happening to you?" A floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around, breath caught in my throat. In the doorway stood an older woman in a faded floral robe and house slippers, clutching a bunch of mail. Her gray hair was pinned up with a plastic clip, and she wore the tired expression of someone who has seen too much without being asked. "I didn't mean to startle you," she said. Her voice was raspy, like she'd smoked for too many years. "I'm Mrs. Green from next door. You must be Marcus's mama." I nodded, unable to trust my voice. She sighed, and her shoulders sagged with pity. I was wondering when someone would come. My tongue felt like sand. Where is my son? Where is Alina?" Mrs. Green looked at the mess around us and shook her head slowly. "Your boy? I don't know where that one's run off to. He's been in and out with music blasting, friends coming all hours. But your girl," she paused, eyes softening, "the ambulance took her 3 nights ago." The word sliced through me. Ambulance? Neighbor downstairs heard a thud, said it sounded like someone fell. They found her on the floor. She looked bad, skin like paper, barely breathing. She gulped. "I thought somebody would come back for her. The door's been like this since." The room tilted. I grabbed the back of a chair to keep from sinking to the floor. 3 nights. 3 nights Alina had been gone from here. Marcus hadn't called me. He hadn't called anyone, and he sure hadn't washed a dish. "Do you know which hospital?" I choked out. Mrs. Green nodded. "St. Matthew's, the big one down by the river. They take the serious cases there." I thanked her, I think. My voice didn't sound like mine anymore. As I hurried back down those stairs and flagged a taxi with shaking hands, one thought kept pounding in my head. What kind of storm had my girl been living through while I was sitting at home making soup? And even then, I still didn't know the worst of it. That part was yet to come. St. Matthew's Hospital hummed with the quiet chaos that only hospitals understand. The automatic doors exhaled warm, antiseptic air as I stepped inside, clutching my tote like it could anchor me. The floors were too shiny, the walls too white. People moved quickly, their shoes whispering against the linoleum, their eyes carrying stories they'd never tell. I walked straight to the reception desk, my voice surprising me with how firm it sounded. "My daughter-in-law was brought in 3 nights ago. Her name is Alina Morales. I need to see her." There was typing, a frown, a glance at the screen. "Intensive care," the clerk said finally. "ICU, 3rd floor, but visiting is restricted." Restricted. I repeated that word in my head as I rode the elevator up, feeling every second drag. When the doors opened, the sound changed. It got quieter, but sharper. The beeping of machines, the soft swoosh of ventilators, the low murmur of nurses, all layered together into something that made my bones feel hollow. A nurse with kind eyes stopped me at the ICU doors. "Family?" "Yes," I whispered. "Her mother-in-law." "She's critical," the nurse said as gently as someone can say something like that. "I'll see if the doctor can speak with you." I sat on a hard plastic chair while moments stretched like long, thin threads. On the wall, a clock ticked far too loudly. I stared at the second hand, trying to breathe in time with its steady, indifferent movement. When the doctor approached, he looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. His glasses sat low on his nose, and a deep line carved itself between his eyebrows. "Mrs. Santos, but you can call me Elena, please. How is she?" He took a breath, and in that breath I heard every piece of news he'd ever had to deliver. "Alina is very sick," he began. "Severe pneumonia, both lungs. She's malnourished, dehydrated, and her body is exhausted. This didn't happen overnight. She's been like this for a long time without proper care." Each word was like a stone dropping into an already overfull well. She has a fever we've been struggling to bring down. If the neighbor hadn't called 911 when she collapsed, she wouldn't be here. We've put her into a medically induced coma so her body can rest while we support her lungs." "Can I see her?" My voice broke on the last word. He hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Just for a minute. Prepare yourself. She doesn't look the way you remember." The room they led me into was dim, lit by the glow of monitors and the faint evening light sneaking around the edges of the blinds. The air smelled like alcohol swabs and something sterile that made my throat hurt. And there she was, my Alina. She lay on the bed, swallowed by white sheets that made her skin look almost translucent. Her cheekbones jutted out sharply, lips cracked and dry around the tube taped to her mouth. Dark hair fanned out on the pillow, damp with sweat. She had always been small, but now she looked like a fragile glass doll someone had forgotten on a high shelf. A ventilator hissed softly beside her, pushing air into lungs that couldn't manage on their own. The monitor above her blinked in green and blue, tracing each heartbeat, each breath for me to see. I reached for her hand. It was hot, dry, weightless in my palm. "I'm here, baby," I whispered, leaning close so only she would hear. "It's Mama Elena. You're not alone anymore." For a long moment, I just stood there, my tears falling silently onto the sheet. Guilt clawed up my throat. Why didn't I come sooner? Why did I wait 3 days of silence? What kind of mother lets worry sit on the stove and simmer like soup until it boils over? I wanted to promise her that everything would be okay, but the words got stuck somewhere between my aching chest and my dry lips. I stepped back, just a little, wiping my face with the side of my hand. Through the narrow slit in the blinds, I could see the hospital steps below, the very ones I'd stand on later that night. I didn't know it yet, but while I watched Alina fight for her life, my son was about to drive past the building that held his wife and his mother, laughing like nothing in this world could ever touch him. And when I finally saw him, something in me would change forever. Hours blurred together into a gray fog made of coffee, machine beeps, and the rustle of nurses' shoes. I sat in the waiting area outside the ICU, my hands wrapped around a paper cup of tea that had gone from hot to warm to cold. I didn't drink it. I just needed something to hold, something to keep my fingers from picking at the loose threads of my sleeve. At some point, a nurse touched my shoulder. "You should get some air, Mrs. Santos. Just for a minute. You've been here all day." She was right. My head felt like it was wrapped in cotton. My body ached from the hard chair. So I obeyed. I rode the elevator down to the lobby and walked out the front doors into the cool evening air. The sky was turning that deep indigo that always makes me think of old bruises. I stood at the bottom of the concrete steps, took a shaky breath, and tried to pray. "God," I whispered to the empty air, "I've worked my whole life. I've sacrificed everything for this family. I don't ask for much. Just, please, please let that girl live." My voice cracked on the last word. I swallowed hard and wiped my nose with the back of my hand like a child. That's when I heard it. The bass, the engine, the laughter. I turned my head, and there it was. The black SUV I'd chosen from the glossy catalog. I remembered Marcus sitting beside me at the dealership, eyes shining like a little boy. "This one, Ma, it's perfect. Think about the kids we'll have. Alina will be so safe in this." I had smiled then, heart swelling. "Of course, baby," I had told him. "We'll get you the best. You deserve it." Now that same car swung around the corner too fast, the music pounding, tires screeching slightly as he took the turn. I saw my son's profile lit up by the dashboard, jawline sharp, sunglasses pushed up on his head even though the sun was gone. The two girls in the car laughed and leaned close to him. One flicked her long hair over her shoulder in a way that made something inside me burn. He didn't look at the hospital. Not once. The SUV roared past, leaving the smell of gasoline and a faint echo of cheap perfume in the air. I stood frozen on that step. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. My fingers went numb around the edge of my coat. When my phone buzzed in my pocket, it was almost like I already knew what was waiting for me. I pulled it out. My hands were perfectly steady. "Hey, Ma. I'm at the hospital with Alina right now. It's really serious. The doctors are doing everything they can. I haven't left her side. Pray for us." The words swam on the screen. I remembered the boy who used to run home breathless just to show me a gold star on his school paper. I remembered the teenager who cried when his first girlfriend broke his heart. I remembered holding him that night, stroking his hair, telling him, "You're a good boy, Marcus. You're a good boy." Where had he gone? When exactly did he disappear? Because the man who had just driven past his dying wife to take two strangers for a joyride was not my good boy. He was something else, something I didn't want to put a name to. People think mothers snap in storms of shouting and throwing things. Maybe some do. Me? I got very quiet. I felt something break. Clean, cold, final, like a thin wire pulled too tight for too long. My thumb moved by itself. I typed, "praying." I didn't send it. I erased it. Instead, I slid the phone back into my pocket, turned my heel, and walked back into the hospital. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to do something much worse, and I had no idea then just.
The lobby was quieter now. Visiting hours were ending. Families stood in little clusters, whispering to each other, holding coats and empty coffee cups like shields. I moved past them all and sat down in a chair near a window. Outside, the streetlights painted the pavement in dull yellow patches. The coffee machine hummed beside me, releasing a burnt smell into the air. I took out my phone and stared at it for a long moment. "Marcus is distressed," a voice in my head tried one last time. "He's scared. People do stupid things when they're scared." But another voice, older and quieter, whispered back, "Scared people don't lie about sitting by a hospital bed while they're speeding past the building with strangers." My hand stopped shaking. It became very steady. I called 911. "Emergency services? What's your emergency?" The dispatcher sounded tired but alert. "Good evening," I said, my voice as calm as if I were ordering a pizza. "I'd like to report a stolen vehicle." There was a pause. "All right, ma'am. Can you give me your name and the details of the vehicle?" I did. Full name, make, model, license plate, the whole truth. "And when was the vehicle taken?" "It just passed St. Matthew's Hospital heading downtown," I said. "Black SUV, the driver is a man in his 30s, possibly intoxicated, accompanied by two young women. He does not have permission to use that car." "Do you know the driver, ma'am?" I closed my eyes for a brief second. Behind my eyelids, I saw Marcus at 6 years old, holding up a Mother's Day card made from construction paper and glue. "Do I know the driver?" "I know who he used to be," I whispered, then more firmly into the phone. "No, I do not know that man." "Understood," the dispatcher replied, her voice now all business. "We're putting out a notice to patrol units right now. You may receive a call back. Please keep your phone on." "I will," I said. "Thank you." I hung up. I expected my hand to tremble afterward. It didn't. It rested quietly in my lap, the phone like a small, dark stone on my palm. I had just called the police on my own child. I had just told the law that my son was a stranger. And still, as I sat there, the worst pain wasn't from that. Not yet. It was from the image of Alina's face on that pillow, her body burned with fever while he drove past with the windows down. If I had to choose between them in that moment, between the girl who had married into my family with her soft hands and shy smile, and the boy I had raised with my own body, I chose her. I don't know if people will understand that. Maybe only the ones who have watched one child destroy another. My phone buzzed again, this time with a new voicemail notification. Marcus had tried calling while I was talking to emergency services. I pressed play. "Ma, what is going on?" His voice was sharp, offended. "The cops pulled us over like I stole something. They're saying the car is reported stolen. Did you do that? Are you out of your mind? Call me back, right now." I listened to his anger without flinching. No mention of Alina, no question about how she was, just his car, his pride, his inconvenience. I deleted the message. Then I did something even harder. I opened my contacts and scrolled down to a name I hadn't called in a while. Rosa Alvarez, attorney. Rosa had been my friend since we were both young women working at the shipping yard, two girls with tired feet and big dreams. She'd gone to law school while I built my logistics business. She knew contracts and courts the way I knew trucks and routes. I dialed. "Elena?" she answered on the second ring, surprise in her voice. "It's late. Are you all right?" "No," I said quietly, "but I'm done pretending. I need your help, Rosa, tonight." I told her everything. The unpaid bills, the pills, the ambulance, the car, the lie, the hospital, the lie. On the other end of the line, I heard her exhale slowly. "All right," she said, her tone shifting into something sharper. "Listen to me carefully. We're going to protect that girl, and we're going to protect you. But you have to be ready, Elena. This won't be pretty." "I buried pretty when I saw her on that pillow," I replied. I looked through the glass at the ICU doors as I spoke, feeling a strange new strength settle into my bones. I had no idea yet about the papers Marcus had already forged, or how close I'd come to losing everything I'd worked for. But that truth was coming, and it would cut deeper than anything.
At every beep, I went back to the apartment. The taxi driver didn't speak. He probably saw the look on my face in the rearview mirror and decided silence was safer. The city outside the window looked washed out, like someone had taken an eraser to all its colors. When I stepped back into Marcus and Alina's place, that same stale smell wrapped around me again. But now I understood it wasn't just old food and spilled liquor. It was neglect. It was abandonment. It was grief rotting in a place where love should have lived. Rosa had asked me to find Alina's documents, her ID, her insurance card, so the hospital could process some formalities. I started in the bedroom. The bed was unmade, sheets twisted like someone had tossed for hours in fever. A glass of water sat on the nightstand, half full, a thin film on the surface. Beside it lay an empty bowl with a crust of soup dried along the rim. I opened the top drawer of the nightstand. Some tissues, a little jar of cream, a pair of earrings, nothing important. Then I opened the bottom drawer. Under a neatly folded stack of t-shirts was a notebook with a soft, worn cover the color of old rose petals. A pen was clipped to the front. I don't know why I picked it up. Maybe because it looked loved, in a room where everything else looked carelessly used. I flipped it open. The first thing I saw was the date. Months ago. The handwriting was small and slanted, letters pressed into the page like each word had weight. February 3rd. Marcus said I'm too dramatic again. I told him I felt dizzy, that my chest hurt. He laughed and turned up the TV. I keep telling myself he's just stressed. A good wife is patient, right? My throat tightened. I flipped the page. March 11th. I pawned Grandma's bracelet today. I cried in the bathroom of the pawn shop so the man at the counter wouldn't see. Marcus needed money to look right for a meeting. He said no one respects a man without a good watch. My head hurts. I haven't bought my medicine this week. I'll start again when things are better. Page after page. She wrote about selling her jewelry, about taking extra shifts at the library, about Marcus coming home smelling like alcohol and perfume, demanding money she didn't have. April 28th. The gas company sent another notice. I begged Marcus to pay it. He said, "Do you want heat or do you want me to land this big deal?" We argued. He grabbed the notice out of my hand and tore it up. I found the pieces in the trash and taped it back together. I'm scared. My hands shook as I turned each page. My eyes burned. May 9th. I woke up shivering. The apartment felt like a refrigerator. I checked the thermostat. Off. Marcus said heat is for people who don't know how to hustle. Put on a sweater, he told me. My chest aches. I can't stop coughing. I'm so tired, but I have to wait. He says once the deal goes through, we'll be rich, and all this will be worth it. I closed the diary gently, like it was something fragile that might fall apart. This wasn't just a story of a bad husband. This was a slow, deliberate erasing of a human being. I slipped the diary into my bag. Part of me hated myself for reading it. Another part knew I needed to. Rosa called while I was still in the bedroom. "Elena, I pulled the property records on your apartment," she said without preamble. "You're still listed as the sole owner. For now." For now? My stomach clenched. She added, "Marcus applied for a loan last week, a big one, from one of those ugly lenders that charge interest that should be illegal. As collateral, he gave them copies of your apartment papers and a power of attorney document, allegedly signed by you." My knees almost gave out. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed. "Send me a picture," I whispered. A second later, the photo came through. There it was, my name at the bottom in a handwriting that looked like mine if you squinted, but the little loop I always make on the E, the one I've made since I first learned to write, that loop was wrong. "He forged my signature?" My voice sounded hollow. "Yes," replied Rosa. "If the loan had gone through and he defaulted, which he would have given his history, you could have lost the apartment. They would have had every legal reason to come after your property. Elena, he was willing to gamble the roof over both of your heads." I looked around the room. The crooked picture on the wall, the cheap chair by the window, the bed where Elena probably coughed and coughed while he talked about big deals. My son had almost sold the floor under her feet and the walls around her for money he'd blow in a week. The last pieces slid into place. The lies, the silence, the unpaid bills. The boy I'd prayed for, worked for, sacrificed for, had grown into a man who saw us, both of us, as chips on his table. I thought my heart had broken on the hospital steps, but what I felt in that bedroom holding that phone and that diary was worse. It was the death of an illusion. I stood up slowly. "Rosa," I said, "draft the papers, today. Everything goes to Elena, every brick, every tile, and I want a new will. My son will inherit nothing from me but his own choices." I heard her exhale, long and low. "I'll have it ready by morning." I hung up, looked at the empty bed, and whispered into the stale air, "I'm sorry, baby. I should have known sooner." But that was only the beginning of...
Rosa's office always used to feel warm to me. Bookshelves full of thick law volumes, the smell of coffee and printer ink, the soft tick of a clock on the wall. That morning, it felt like a courtroom. She slid the documents across her desk with careful hands. "This is the deed of gift," she said. "It transfers the apartment fully to Elena. No conditions, no loopholes. If registered today, Marcus can't touch it." I picked up the pen. The metal felt heavy, cool against my fingers. My name flowed onto the paper, Elena Santos, in strong, dark ink. With each loop and line, I felt ties unraveling inside me. I wasn't just signing away property, I was signing away the future I had imagined, the picture frame in my mind where my son lived in this home with his wife and their children, bringing them to my door for Sunday dinners. That life was gone. Rosa slid another document forward. "And this is the new will," she said. "I've included the charity we talked about, the animal shelter. You can change it later if you want, but not to him. Not unless he becomes a different man." I read the words. All my assets, from the business I'd built with my bare hands to the savings I'd scraped and saved, going someplace that would never call me at 2 a.m. demanding money, someplace that would never turn off the heat on a sick woman. I signed. My heart ached, but beneath the ache there was a strange lightness. Rosa watched me quietly. "You know he'll be furious," she said gently. "He'll say terrible things. He'll try to make you feel like a monster, like you've failed him as a mother." "I already failed him," I replied, my voice soft but steady. "I failed him when I covered for him, paid his debts, believed his promises instead of looking at his actions. I taught him that I was his safety net. Maybe the kindest thing I can do now is cut the net." She nodded, eyes shining for a moment. "There's something else you can do." "What's that?" she said. "Take his favorite toy away. The car. It's in your name. Use it." The dealership was more than happy to answer my call. The manager's voice practically turned to honey when he recognized me. "Mrs. Santos, how's that beautiful SUV treating your family?" I closed my eyes briefly. "It's not," I said. "I need it to be picked up from the police impound, today. I authorize you to sell it immediately. Lowest trade-in price, I don't care. But, yes? The money doesn't go to me. It goes directly to St. Matthew Hospital in care of Alina Morales, market for her treatment and recovery." There was a brief silence on the line. Then, "Of course, ma'am, we'll handle it." I hung up and stared at my hands. Once, those hands had held my son's tiny foot as I put his first shoe on. Now they had just sold his pride and joy without his consent. I thought of him sitting in a holding cell, confident that his mother would swoop in, smooth everything over, bring the car papers, pay the fine, blame the police for overreacting. Not this time. Later that afternoon, the call came from an officer. "Mrs. Santos, we have your son, Marcus Santos, in custody." His tone was clipped. "He insists the car was a misunderstanding, claims you gave him permission." I looked through the window at the ICU sign down the hall. "Officer," I said, my voice clear, "my son is at his wife's bedside, praying and holding her hand. He hasn't left her side. Whoever you have is someone I do not recognize. You should treat him like any stranger found in a stolen vehicle." There was a pause on the line. I heard a scrape of a chair, a muffled voice in the background, a sharp command. "Understood, ma'am. We'll proceed accordingly." I hung up gently, like placing a lid on a boiling pot. The next 2 days, my phone lit up over and over with calls from an unknown number from the jail. I let it ring. He left a message once. I listened to it standing just outside Alina's room, watching her through the glass. "Ma, what are you doing?" he shouted, voice frayed with panic and rage. "They're saying you reported the car stolen. You know that's not true. Come down here with the papers and fix this. I'm your son. You can't leave me in here with these people. I smell like them. This is insane. Call me back, now." Not one word about his wife. Not one question. I deleted the voicemail. Inside the room, a monitor beeped steadily. Alina's chest rose and fell with machine-assisted breaths. I placed my palm against the glass and whispered, "I'm here, baby. I'm not leaving you. Not like he did." The paperwork was done. The car was gone. The money was on its way to the hospital's account. All that remained was the confrontation. The moment Marcus would step out of that cell, come storming back into our lives, expecting everything to fall back into place. He had no idea that the locks on his world had already been changed, and what came next would show him just how alone his choices had left him. They released Marcus on the second day.
I knew because the calls from the jail stopped, and because Rosa sent me a short text with a screenshot from his social media, a nasty little post from a girl tagging him, calling him a loser and a fraud, telling all her ladies not to fall for his tricks. Karma moves quietly at first, then it starts to speak. That afternoon, I was in the lobby of St. Matthew's, pretending to read a book from the hospital cart. My eyes kept drifting to the elevator. At last, the doors slid open with a familiar ding. He stepped out, wearing wrinkled clothes and a face full of anger. He looked thinner than when I'd last seen him in person. Stubble shadowed his jaw, his eyes were bloodshot, hair sticking up like he'd run his hands through it too many times. But he still moved like he was walking into his own living room, like the world owed him space. When he saw me, he marched straight over, his steps echoing sharply on the tile. "Finally," he snapped, voice too loud for a hospital. "What did you do, Ma?" A few heads turned. A nurse frowned in our direction. I closed the book slowly, placing it on my lap. "Lower your voice," I said. "This is a place of sick people." "Sick," he scoffed. "You put your own son in with criminals for 2 days? 2 days, Ma? Do you know what that's like?" I looked at him, really looked, at the indignation on his face, the way his mouth twisted, how his eyes darted, not toward the ICU doors, but toward the exit, like he was already planning his next move. "You were in a car you had no right to be in," I replied softly. "The law did its job." "That's my car," he hissed. "My birthday present. You said it was for me, for my future family. You can't just—" "I did," I interrupted. "It's sold." He blinked. "What?" "The dealership picked it up from impound this morning. The money went to the hospital, to Alina's care, to the wife you have not asked about once." His mouth opened and closed like a fish. For a second, I saw something raw flash in his eyes. Not love, not concern, but pure panic. "You had no right," he repeated, but the words were weaker now. "As the legal owner, I had every right," I replied, "just like I had the right to sign over the apartment." "What apartment?" he asked, but I could see in the tightening of his jaw that he already knew. His voice got higher, thinner. "Ma, what apartment?" "The one you almost lost for all of us," I said. "It now belongs solely to Alina. Your name is nowhere on the deed. You have no claim to it. None." His face went white, then red, then an ugly, blotchy mix of both. "You can't do that," he said. "I live there. That's my home." "You lived there," I corrected. "Past tense. The locks are being changed as we speak." He stared at me, chest heaving. The lobby seemed to shrink around us, the low murmur of voices fading into a distant hum. Then, all at once, he dropped to his knees. Right there on the hospital floor, in front of the reception desk and the vending machines, and a poster about flu vaccines, my grown son grabbed the hem of my coat. "Ma," he sobbed, tears spilling down his cheeks, "please, you can't do this. You're all I have. I messed up, okay? I know I messed up, but I'll fix it. I'll get a job. I'll take care of Alina. I'll sit by her bed every day. Just give me the apartment back. Give me a chance. I'm your son." His hands were cold on my fabric. His tears darkened the gray wool. I looked down at him, my heart twisting. The memories came rushing. Him as a baby, as a boy, as a teenager whispering secrets to me late at night. For a moment, I heard the old Elena, the one who would have pulled him up, hugged him, said, "We'll work it out, mijo." But then the images changed. Alina's diary, the forged papers, the turned-off heat, the empty pill bottles, her skeletal hand in mine. My voice, when it came, surprised even me. "Stand up, Marcus." He clung tighter. "Not until you say you forgive me." "I forgive you," I said. His head snapped up. I forgive you as a mother forgives, but forgiveness does not mean I put the knife back in your hand and turn my back. He stared at me, breath ragged. You say you're my son, then act like one. Get up. Go earn a bed. Go earn your own keys. Go earn someone's trust, because you have burned through mine. He staggered to his feet slowly, wiping his face with the back of his hand. The softness vanished from his expression, replaced with something colder. You're choosing her over me, he said, voice low and dangerous. I'm choosing what's right over what's easy, I replied. He glared past me, toward the ICU. I'm going to see my wife, he said, and strode toward the doors. He pushed them open, but he only made it 2 steps inside. A large man in a security uniform stepped in front of him, blocking his way. Authorized visitors only. Name? I'm her husband. Move. I have instructions, the guard replied calmly. No male visitors except medical staff without prior approval. You're not on the list. Marcus turned to look at me, eyes wild. Ma, he shouted, tell them I can see her. She's my wife. I sat back down in my chair, hands folded in my lap. I didn't move. Take him out, I said quietly. The guard didn't hear me, but somehow he acted anyhow. They escorted Marcus back through the doors, out into the lobby. He stared at me with something like hatred. You'll regret this, he said between clenched teeth. I swear you'll regret it. Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. All I knew in that moment was that I was done sacrificing lambs to keep my son's ego fed. And when he ran off to the only place he had left, the apartment that was no longer his, he had no idea what waited there for him. What came next shattered the last illusion he was clinging to.
With my own eyes. Rosa told me later over coffee at the hospital cafeteria. Her face held that look lawyers get when they've watched something ugly but necessary. Marcus had arrived at the building in a fury, bounding up the steps 2 at a time. He'd stormed down the hallway, fishing his keys from his pocket, probably rehearsing the speech he'd give Alina when he walked in. Except the door was open. Inside, 2 locksmiths were installing a new heavy-duty lock. A technician was wiring in a small security panel on the wall. A police officer leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, supervising the process. Rosa stood in the middle of the living room, calm as always, a folder in her hand. "What the hell is going on?" Marcus had demanded. "Get out of my apartment." "This is no longer your apartment," Rosa replied, voice clipped but polite. "As of 9 o'clock this morning, legal ownership transferred to Alina Morales. Here is the registered deed." She held up the paper. His eyes skimmed it, desperate, clinging to any word that might rescue him. "It's illegal," he had shouted. "She can't just kick me out. I live here." "You were deregistered this morning," Rosa said. "All legal procedures were followed. As of now, you are a guest here only if Alina agrees. Given that she is currently in intensive care and unable to consent, you are not allowed to remain on the premises." He'd tried to push past her, head toward the bedroom, maybe to grab cash, jewelry, something he could sell. The police officer stepped in his way. "Sir, don't make this harder than it has to be," the officer had said. "You have no rights here anymore." "What about my things?" Marcus had snarled. "I have clothes, shoes, my laptop." "Your personal items have been packed. They're right outside." 2 black trash bags and an old duffel sat in the hallway, stuffed full. His life condensed. "The laptop stays," she added. "It was bought on credit under Alina's name. Until the debt is paid, it's considered her asset." That part, I will admit, made something in me grimly satisfied. He'd taken the bags, cursing under his breath, and stormed down the stairs, out into the street. Outside, he'd pulled out his wallet with shaking hands and stared at the gold bank card I'd given him years ago. "For emergencies only," I had said. I suppose this counted as an emergency for him.
Rosa said she could imagine him thinking, "I'll get a hotel room, a nice one. Ma will come down in a day or two. She always does. Then she'll call. She'll say she's sorry. She'll fix it." He went to the nearest ATM, plugged in the card, typed in the familiar PIN. The machine whirred, then flashed a message across the screen. "Card blocked. Please contact your bank." Then, calmly, almost rudely, it swallowed the card. Rosa's voice softened when she told me that part. "Elena, he hit the machine, like a child having a tantrum. Security came out and told him to leave or they'd call the cops again." I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the milk swirl. I had gone to the bank that morning, signed the forms, and closed his access to my accounts. I'd walked out into the sunlight feeling like someone who had severed a limb to stop the infection spreading to her heart. "Where is he now?" I asked. She shrugged. "I don't know. He has 2 trash bags, no home, no car, no money, and a few burned bridges. He'll find a couch for a while, a floor. It's not your responsibility to track him anymore." I nodded, but it hurt. Motherhood doesn't evaporate just because boundaries appear. It pulls and tugs and whispers, "Go get him, fix it, just this one last time." But then I would think of Alina, her voice weak and hoarse from the ventilator, whispering when she first woke up, "Don't let him in." She had said it with a fear that had nothing to do with illness and everything to do with survival. So I stayed by her side instead. As the days turned into weeks and she slowly regained strength, we talked. She told me things she had never planned to tell anyone, about nights spent shivering under 3 blankets, about hiding cash in a cereal box so she could buy medicine, about feeling more alone in that apartment than she ever had in her life. My anger at Marcus was still there, but it had cooled into something different, not a burning fire, but a hard stone, a boundary. 6 months later, when the leaves started to turn and the air smelt like rain and cinnamon, I'd almost made peace with the fact that I might never see my son again. Almost. But karma isn't done until it makes you look your choices in the face. And one crisp afternoon, I did. The world looked different 6 months later. Alina sat on the balcony of her apartment, legs tucked under a soft blanket, a cup of chamomile tea steaming beside her. She had color in her cheeks again. Her hair, though thinner, shone in the afternoon light. A sketchbook lay open on her lap. She'd begun drawing again, little by little as her hands stopped shaking. "You sure you don't want me to pick up the groceries?" she asked, lifting her head with that gentle smile I'd come to love. "I'm sure," I said, wrapping a scarf around my neck. "You just stay there and make that balcony prettier with your pictures." She rolled her eyes playfully. "Don't forget the cinnamon rolls." "I wouldn't dare," I replied. I left through the new front door, the one with the sturdy lock and the little chime that rang softly when it opened. The air outside felt crisp, cool against my face. Leaves crunched under my shoes as I walked. I passed children playing on the sidewalk, their laughter ringing out like bells. A little girl in a red coat ran past me, her father chasing her, both of them breathless and happy. I smiled at them and felt something loosen in my chest. At the corner, there was a car wash, just a small one. I'd walked past it 100 times without looking. Men in rubber boots sprayed water, soap foam sliding down windshields, radios playing low in the background. The whole place smelled like wet concrete and cheap detergent. For some reason, today, my eyes wandered over. And then I saw him, bent over the side of a muddy pickup, scrubbing at the tires with red, chapped hands, wearing a gray jumpsuit soaked through at the sleeves. Marcus. He had lost weight, his shoulders slumped, his hair was shorter, almost ragged like it had been cut by someone indifferent. His face had lines that hadn't been there 6 months ago, small grooves etched by worry and too many bad nights. A spray of cold water hit his boots. He flinched, then kept scrubbing. He felt my gaze. Slowly he straightened up and turned. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the narrow strip of street and years of shared history. Cars passed between us, tires hissing on the damp pavement. My heart gave a painful little lurch. I thought of the first time I saw him, wrapped in a hospital blanket, his tiny fist grabbing my finger. He opened his mouth. His lips moved around a word I knew by heart. Ma. I could hear another voice in my head, the one from the diary, the one from the hospital bed. Don't let him in. I didn't turn away. I didn't run to him. I just looked at the reality of who he'd chosen to become, looked at the consequences I'd finally stopped cushioning. He took a half step toward me, rag dripping foam onto the ground. His eyes shimmered with something like shame, or maybe hunger. I gave him a small nod, not cruel, not kind, just a nod, a recognition that he existed, nothing more. Then I turned and walked on. My phone buzzed in my pocket before I reached the bakery, an unknown number, a text. Ma, please, I know you saw me. I can't keep living like this. I get it now. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Just help me a little, even $10 for food, please. I stopped on the sidewalk. The smell of fresh bread and sugar drifted from the bakery door. Children laughed behind me somewhere. A bus hissed as it pulled up to the curb. My thumb hovered over the screen. It would be so easy. $10, a small act, a crack in a door I'd slammed shut. But I thought of all the times I'd helped a little before. Every rescue, every bailout, every last-minute save that allowed him to escape the lesson life was trying to teach him. I thought of Alina sipping her tea on the balcony, finally safe, finally breathing without fear that the thermostat would be turned off for a gamble. I took a deep breath. It shivered slightly on the way in. Then I tapped block number. The screen blinked. The message thread vanished. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and opened the bakery door. Warm air wrapped around me, smelling of butter and cinnamon. "Afternoon, Miss Santos," the girl behind the counter chirped. "The usual?" "Yes, dear," I said, my voice steady. "2 cinnamon rolls, please, the big ones." As she boxed them up, I felt no triumph, no revenge, just a tired, quiet acceptance. Everyone eats from the table they lay for themselves. Marcus had set his with lies, selfishness, and neglect. I had simply stopped bringing extra plates. But there was one thing left to say, one truth I wanted to leave with anyone listening to my story. That night, after Alina and I shared our cinnamon rolls at the small kitchen table, she went to bed early, tired in that soft, healthy way people get when they've had a full day of living, not surviving. I stayed up a little longer, sitting by the window with a cup of tea cradled in my hands, the steam curled up in front of my face, carrying the faint scent of chamomile and honey. Outside, rain tapped gently against the glass, a soft, steady drumming. I watched the city lights blur through the water droplets and thought about beginnings and endings. The night I saw Marcus drive past this hospital, laughing with strangers while his wife lay between life and death, I thought that was the worst moment of my life. It wasn't. The hardest moment was choosing to stop saving him. You see, people don't tell mothers this part. They tell us to love, to forgive, to give endless second chances. They tell us, he's your son, blood is blood, you can't turn your back. But there's something they leave out. If your love keeps rescuing someone from the consequences of their own cruelty, that love stops being love. It becomes a ladder they use to climb onto other people's backs. Every time I paid one of Marcus's debts, I taught him that there would always be a soft place to land. Every time I turned a blind eye to the late nights and the empty apologies, I told him, you can break things, I'll clean them up. And every time I focused on his comfort over Alina's safety, I failed her. That's the part that keeps me up some nights. I can't rewrite the past. I can't go back and stand in that apartment sooner, holding that unopened medicine in one hand and those unpaid bills in the other. I can't go back and say enough before her body had to do all the shouting. What I can do, and what I finally did, is draw a line. I chose the girl who had no one over the boy who had always had someone. I chose the truth over the story I'd been telling myself about my son. I chose to let karma do its slow, steady work, even when it tugged at my heart like a child begging for candy in a store. Karma doesn't need us to be cruel. It just needs us to stop interfering. Now, when I see Alina paint on the balcony, when I hear her humming in the kitchen, when I feel her small hand slip into mine as we cross the street, I know I made the right choice. As for Marcus, I don't know where his road will lead. Maybe one day he'll sit on some worn couch in a tiny room and feel something crack open in his own chest. Maybe he'll finally understand the weight of the things he's done. Maybe he'll learn to ask himself the questions he never wanted to face. Did I ever truly value the people who loved me, or did I just use them until they couldn't stand anymore? If that day comes, and if he knocks on this door, not the way he used to, full of demands and expectations, but empty-handed and honest, I don't know what I'll do. I'm not that far ahead in the story yet. What I do know is this. Love does not mean letting someone burn your house down just because they're family. Forgiveness does not